They thought she was just a student, until everyone discovered she was a Navy SEAL veteran. When Nora walked into the university's main building on the first day of September, nobody paid attention to her. And honestly, that was exactly what she wanted. She was 32 years old. The students around her were 18, 19, maybe 20. They were taking selfies outside the entrance, arguing about which dorm had better Wi-Fi, and nervously checking their schedules on their phones. Nora walked past all of them with a single bag over one shoulder, found the registration desk, picked up her student ID, and headed straight to her room. No drama, no fuss. Her roommate that semester was a 19-year-old named Dia. The moment Nora walked in and started unpacking, Dia watched her silently for a few seconds, and then said, "Are you okay? You're folding your clothes like a soldier." Nora laughed softly. "Old habit," she said, and that was that. But it wasn't just the way she folded her clothes. It was everything. The way she woke up every morning at 5, without an alarm. The way she always sat near exits in class, never in the middle of a room. The way she never left anything on the floor. The way she looked at people before they noticed her looking, quickly reading them, and then looking away. Little things. Things nobody would normally notice. But Dia noticed. Still, nobody asked. People rarely do when someone seems calm and put together. They assume you're fine, and they move on. Nora was counting on that. She had come back to school for one reason. She wanted to become a trauma nurse. After everything she had seen in her life, after everything she had lived through, she wanted to be the person in the room who knew what to do when things fell apart. She had always been that person. She just wanted the official degree to prove it. The first few weeks of class were strange for her. Not hard, strange. She had spent the last 10 years making decisions in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. And now she was sitting in a lecture hall listening to a professor explain how to write a proper bibliography. She didn't complain. She just wrote it down and kept going. Some of her classmates found her a little intimidating without fully understanding why. In study groups, she had a habit of saying exactly what she meant. No filler words, no softening. No, "I think maybe possibly this could be the answer." She just said the answer. Some people liked that. Others found it a bit unsettling. There was one guy in her anatomy study group, Rohan, who had a habit of acting like he already knew everything. He would cut people off mid-sentence, wave off answers he hadn't even heard yet, and then act surprised when the group didn't do as well as expected. One evening, they were reviewing how the body responds to sudden, severe injury. Rohan was explaining it in a vague, textbook way that wasn't quite right. Nora let him finish. Then she said, quietly but clearly, "That's not exactly how it works." And she explained, in plain language, no jargon, what actually happens to the human body when it goes into shock. She talked about the way blood pressure drops, the way breathing changes, the way the body starts shutting down things it doesn't immediately need in order to protect the heart and brain. She spoke for about 90 seconds. The room was completely silent when she finished. Nobody asked how she knew that. But from that evening, nobody interrupted her in group sessions either. Dia was the one who finally asked, one night when they were both up late, and the room had that quiet feeling that makes it easier to talk honestly. "Nora," she said, "where did you serve?" Nora looked up from her textbook. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Navy." Disha nodded slowly. "For how long?" Nora paused again. 10 years. Disha looked at her for a second, then looked back at her laptop. "Okay," she said, and that was the end of it. No big reaction. No follow-up questions. Nora was grateful for that, more than she could explain. Because here is the thing Nora had learned about telling people she was a veteran. It always changed something. Not in a bad way necessarily, but something shifted. People started treating her differently, some with too much respect, some with too much curiosity, some with a kind of nervous politeness that felt worse than being ignored. She had come to campus to be a student, just a student. She didn't want to be the veteran. She didn't want to be anyone's inspiration or anyone's story. She just wanted to go to class, do the work, and get the degree. What almost nobody knew, what she had told no one, was the full truth of what those 10 years had actually meant. Nora had not just served in the Navy. She had gone through one of the hardest military training programs in the world. She had become a naval special warfare operator, one of the very first women in American history to complete that pipeline and earn the right to be called a Navy SEAL. 3 deployments, 2 of them in active conflict zones. She had done things that most people will never have to imagine. She had made decisions under pressure that most people will never face in their entire lives. She had carried teammates who were hurt. She had lost teammates who didn't make it. She had come home from her 3rd deployment with injuries that ended her military career. But not before she had already done more than most soldiers do in a lifetime. When her military service ended, she spent almost a year figuring out who she was outside of it. That is the part nobody talks about, the part after. The part where you're not in uniform anymore, and the structure that held your whole life together just isn't there. She went through a rough stretch. She won't pretend she didn't, but she got through it. And what came out on the other side was a clear, simple goal. Nursing school. A trauma center. A different kind of mission. So there she was, 32 years old, first-year student, making her bed at 5 in the morning, and sitting through bibliography lectures, and trying her best not to completely shut down study groups with one comment. The day everything changed was a Thursday in October. Nora was walking back from the library around 3 in the afternoon when she heard a commotion near the student union. A small crowd had gathered outside, maybe 30 people, and they were all standing in a loose circle around something on the ground. Nobody was moving in. A few people had their phones out. A couple of campus security officers were there, but they looked uncertain, moving around the outside of the situation without quite entering it. Nora didn't run. She walked, quickly but calmly, and when she reached the crowd, she moved through it the same way she moved through everything, directly and without hesitation. People stepped aside without fully understanding why. On the ground was a young man, maybe 20 years old, curled on his side and shaking. His breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. His eyes were unfocused. He was saying something, but it wasn't making sense. Someone near Nora said he had collapsed, then started becoming agitated and pushing people away. The security officers hadn't been sure whether to restrain him or call for help. Nora crouched down next to him. She didn't touch him immediately. She spoke first, low, calm, the kind of voice that doesn't spike anyone's fear. "Hey, I'm right here with you. You're okay. Can you hear me?" He looked at her. She could see he was registering her voice even through whatever was happening to him. She asked him his name. He told her. She used it. She kept talking to him. One hand was checking his pulse at his wrist. Steady motion, nothing dramatic. She asked someone behind her to call 911 if they hadn't already. She asked another person to go find a building door propped open and hold it. She got him onto his back gently and checked his airway and breathing without making any of it look clinical or scary. To anyone watching, it might have looked like she was just kneeling there, talking to him. But every movement was precise. Every word was chosen. It took about 12 minutes for the paramedics to arrive. By that time, the young man was calmer. Still not okay. He needed medical attention. But he was breathing steadier. He was responsive. And he hadn't hurt himself or anyone else. When the paramedics pulled up, Nora stood and gave them a verbal report, so clean and structured that one of them stopped and looked at her. "Are you a medic?" he asked. She shook her head. "Close enough," she said. Then she picked up the bag she had set down, walked back through the crowd that had never fully dispersed, and kept going toward her next class. She would have liked that to be the end of it. But this is the world we live in now, and at least 4 people had filmed the whole thing. By that night, a short video was already spreading across the university's student groups online. 40 seconds of footage. Nora crouched on the ground, talking the young man through it, one hand on his wrist, completely unbothered by the crowd or the cameras. The comments were immediate and loud. "Who is she? Is she a nurse? Did anyone get her name?" By the next morning, someone had connected the dots. A journalism student found a sparse but public LinkedIn profile. Navy, 2012 to 2022. No detail beyond that. But it was enough for the rumor to start. And once a rumor like that starts on a college campus, it moves fast. It was a military officer connected to the university's ROTI program who eventually, and carefully, shared what the full record actually showed. With Nora's reluctant permission, after a quiet conversation she had not expected to have. What he shared with university leadership was simple. The woman in that video was not just a veteran. She was a Navy SEAL, one of the first women in history to earn that title. The university didn't make a big announcement. They didn't put her name on a banner or call an assembly. Nora had been very clear about that. What she agreed to was small, A brief acknowledgement. On her own terms. In her own time. But the campus already knew. And so what changed was not anything official. It was just how people were around her. Her professor paused before class one morning and said, simply, "It's an honor." Rohan from study group stopped cutting her off, completely, as if a switch had been flipped. Dia showed up one morning with a coffee set silently on Nora's desk, before she even sat down. No explanation, no big moment, just coffee. A few weeks later, a first-year student named Priya, quiet, clearly overwhelmed, on the edge of dropping out, found Nora in the library and sat down across from her. She said she had heard what happened. She said she didn't know how to keep going when everything felt impossible. She was not asking for advice exactly. She was just saying it out loud to someone she thought might understand. Nora put down her pen. She thought about the question the same way she thought about everything, seriously, without rushing. Then she said that for a long time, she kept going because other people were depending on her. And then when that wasn't the reason anymore, when she was on her own and had to figure out who she was, outside of the mission, she kept going because she decided that surviving something hard was not the end of her story. It was just the part that made the rest of it mean something. You don't have to be ready, Nora told her. You just have to show up. Priya didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded, picked up her bag, and went back to her table across the room. Nora finished out the semester with a 3.8. She applied for a placement at a trauma center the following spring. Her academic advisor called her one of the most naturally prepared students she had seen come through the nursing program in years. She still woke up early. She still sat near the exit in every room. Some nights were harder than others, and she dealt with that the way she dealt with most things, quietly, and without making it anyone else's problem. But she was there. She was building something. And one cold morning in January, walking across a quiet campus with her bag over one shoulder and a coffee in her hand, she felt something that was close to settled. Not perfect, not finished, just right. Like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. Nobody on that campus had known, when she walked in on the first day of September, what she had done or what she had survived. They saw a quiet woman who folded her clothes too neatly and didn't talk much. And then they saw who she actually was. And it turned out, she had been exactly that person the whole time.